Have you ever heard about a dream so massive, so ambitious, that it literally sank the country that dreamed it up? Well, that's the story we're getting into today. It's about a nation's all-consuming desire for global power, a vision forged in millions of tons of steel. It's the incredible story of a fleet of battleships that, instead of conquering the world, ended up destroying the very empire that built them.
So at the very heart of this unbelievable story, it all really comes down to one man. His personal ambition, his obsession with naval power, it would set Germany on a collision course with destiny.
And here he is. Meet Kaiser Wilhelm II. Now, when he came to power back in 1888, Germany was already a young, pretty powerful nation. But for Wilhelm, that was nowhere near enough. You could say he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder and a vision for Germany's future that floated on a sea of pure steel.
I mean, think about it. He was just 29 years old, young, super eager to make his mark, and he had this really complicated relationship with the world's #1 naval power. See, he was the grandson of Britain's Queen Victoria, so he had this mix of admiration and just intense jealousy. He was a huge believer in militarism, the idea that a nation's real strength is measured by its army and its navy, and his ultimate goal? To go head-to-head with Britain on the high seas and make Germany a true global empire.
And you know, this wasn't just some personal fantasy he had. Nope, it became official state policy. They called it Weltpolitik, world policy. The idea was pretty simple. If you want to be a world power, you need a world-class navy. And just like that, this policy became the engine behind one of the biggest, most expensive naval buildups in all of history.
But here's the catch. You can't just build a massive fleet of modern, top-of-the-line battleships out of thin air. To make this dream a reality, the Kaiser first had to completely transform the very fabric of German society itself.
Germany was in the middle of this huge shift, from a nation of farms to a nation of factories. And this massive industrialization was absolutely essential. I mean, you need steel mills, you need armament factories, and you need a huge skilled workforce to build the ships that are going to project your power across the globe.
And this is where we see a really unexpected side effect of this whole naval buildup. To keep that industrial machine running like clockwork, and to keep the workers from getting too restless, the government actually brought in a bunch of social reforms. They set up industrial courts, they improved pensions, they even banned work on Sundays. And it was all done for one reason, to keep the shipyards and factories humming along, building the Kaiser's great fleet.
And with the entire country's industry laser-focused on this massive military project, it kind of makes you wonder who was really setting the agenda. This quote pretty much says it all. The Kaiser listened to his generals way more than his own government ministers. National policy, especially foreign policy, was being driven by military ambitions. The army, and by extension the navy, was calling the shots.
So, Germany did it. They got their fleet. The shipyards rolled out these magnificent, powerful battleships. But this is where the story takes its tragic turn. Because when World War I finally broke out in 1914, this incredible weapon fell into a simple but devastating trap.
See, Germany was all geared up for a glorious winner-take-all sea battle. But Britain's Royal Navy, they had other plans. Instead of this epic fight, they just used their bigger fleet to blockade all the German ports. And just like that, the great German high seas fleet, the pride of the nation, was trapped. It couldn't get out, and the nation itself was being slowly strangled. The impact of this blockade was absolutely catastrophic. And it wasn't just about the war effort. It hit the people back home with brutal efficiency. Raw materials for the factories dried up. Essential medicines became impossible to get. Food shortages led to widespread suffering, with ordinary people having to scavenge just to find something to eat.
Just take a second and look at this number. Let it sink in for a moment. 763,000.
That's the estimated number of German civilians who died, not from bombs, not from bullets, but from hunger and disease caused directly by the blockade. And all the while, the Kaiser's incredibly expensive, powerful battleships just sat there, rusting in their ports. The dream of naval glory had turned into a total nightmare of civilian suffering. And this brings us to the final, deeply ironic act of this whole tragedy. The very symbol of the Kaiser's power, the sailors of his prized fleet, would end up being the very thing that caused his ultimate downfall.
By 1918, the country was starving, defeat was right around the corner, and the naval commanders ordered the fleet out for one last suicidal honor battle. The sailors, they saw it for what it was, a pointless waste of life. And they refused. They had had enough. And that one single act of defiance, well, that's all it took.
What happened next was a complete societal collapse. It was like watching dominoes fall, one after another, bringing the whole system down. The naval mutinies inspired workers in the cities to go on strike. Then, soldiers who were sent to crush the uprisings actually joined them instead. Within just a few days, the Kaiser had lost control of the country, and most importantly, he lost the support of his own army.
And the end came so incredibly fast. On November 9th, the Kaiser fled Berlin. Just a day later, his own generals told him they couldn't support him anymore. He abdicated and fled to the neutral Netherlands. Then, on November 11th, a brand new German government signed the armistice. The war was over. The German Empire was gone.
So let's look at the final score here, the dream versus the reality. The goal was Weltpolitik and global power. The result was total national collapse. The goal was a glorious overseas empire. The result was military defeat. The goal was to build a navy to rival Britain. The result was a revolution sparked by that very navy, creating a whole new republic.
You know, this quote just perfectly captures the ultimate irony of the entire story. The massive battleship fleet, the very tool Wilhelm built to project his power and secure his legacy, ended up being the thing that destroyed him and his entire empire.
And it leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about, right? This story is 100 years old, but the lesson feels timeless. What are the battleships of our modern world? What are the massive, expensive projects or symbols of power that nations are betting their entire futures on today? And what unintended consequences might they bring?